Hi, Gareth. It's an awesome pleasure to actually have you in studio today.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So let's get right into it. So you're the guy who actually started Instagram South Africa, which is also world renowned right now. So clearly you saw a gap within the market. Can you just tell us a little bit more about how that started and what prompted you to actually go that route?
Sure. Well, initially it only started off in Johannesburg. I feel like a lot of people who live in Joburg don't get to see a lot of their city. Like they're happy to go to work, go to their favorite restaurants, and then go back home and have watch a movie or something on the couch. And I've always had that element of discovery. So the main reason why I started exploring the city, apart from Instagram, was to sort of rediscover it in that sense. And when Instagram came out, there was a small group of us who actually decided to start taking photos of Joburg that we personally hadn't seen before. Inspired by a lot of the international guys who do something similar, where they'd be shooting shots of New York, streets in New York, and very unique graffiti in certain alleys and that sort of thing. So we were like, hey, wait, we've got things like that in Joburg, why not do the same thing? So we started organizing these little meetups called Insta Meets, and initially there were three of us going through commission the streets and taking photos of the red lines on the floor, and then it started growing.
Speaking of your Instagram account, like I said, it's got a variety of things from architecture, even some cars, and a whole lot of people as well. Instagram in South Africa is kind of catching up, as we usually do with most of social media, But what I want to actually know from you is, where are we in terms of South Africa and using that platform? Where do you think it will head into, and how can one actually shape their own life, their own careers, or whichever sector that they're in, to actually create a brand for themselves?
Yeah. Well, I feel personally that Instagram in South Africa is still seen as a blogging platform, whereas overseas it's utilized in a full sense for marketing totally. And the main thing around that is, at the moment, a lot of the perception around what Instagram is still very loose. So there's the transition that's actually happening right now. Is a lot of brands are realizing actually we need to be on Instagram. A lot of agencies are starting to pitch it to their clients. I get approached by various brands and agencies to help them sort of figure out what that looks like. What is my visual sense of my brand, and how do they represent that within a photo or video sense, So Instagram locally, we're still I'd say we're still very behind. Obviously, naturally, we always, like you said, we take time to catch up. But the nice thing about being behind is that a lot of people are starting to catch up in a very unique sense. So traditionally, agencies will sometimes do a lot of research into what's worked overseas. But now what I'm starting to see is a lot of people will be like, actually, wait, we could use Instagram in this way. It'll be unique, and it'll also apply to our local audience. So that's been amazing, because it's sort of like a Trojan horse, where Instagram was just plonked into the country. And now we're starting to see all these amazing things come up that are intercepting the industry. So with all that said, I think we do have a long way to go as South Africa. But the biggest appeal is that a lot of people want South African content now.
Really?
South African, totally. So I recently did a trip to various African cities, and those images did abnormally well. They were oh wow, we've never seen Africa from the side, and it wasn't the typical sort of African approach. It was a sense of how do you represent it as beautiful? How do you, because then, I mean, to be honest, traditionally a lot of people think Africa and they think about the poverty. And and sure, that stuff's real, but there's a very different side to Africa that a lot of the world is hungry for. People want to see what you and I see, for example. People want to touch and and feel what's tangible here. So in that sense, there's been a lot of really amazing campaigning happening around it. Not particularly around Africa in itself, but how do we take that sort of content that's only really available to us and utilize it in a way that it showcases our continent and our country in a very beautiful essence, you know?
And how does one like shape their brand and stuff like that, you know?
Well, I always tell people that they need to find a narrative. So what is your story that you want to tell? Not necessarily what is my story, but what is the story that you want to project out visually? Because Instagram's so visual, people rarely will read your captions, for example, unless you're a poet and you're on Instagram. Sometimes that happens. But generally, in the more broader sense, people have become visually educated because of Instagram. And the way you sort of craft your own brand, your personal brand, or like a brand for, say, like a company, is that you always say, okay, what can I visually represent that translates into a narrative that I can continue to tell that won't lose the interest of people? Does it make sense?
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming into studio and speaking a little bit more about Instagram and everything else.
Pleasure.
We hope that you have a really awesome future. And
so
and you come back to SA actually, and you know,
I'll be back, don't worry.
diversify our people and how we can use this wonderful platform.
Definitely. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome.